And A check. Sound check.
And camera B check.
Right.
Well, it's nice that tea, thank you. I got a nice brew there.
And I'm looking straight down the lens, yeah.
See the clapper bar next to you?
Yes. Hello. Okay.
Do you know, I literally have never done this in my life. No, I've never ever done. I've never operated a clap. I may not be able to do it.
It's not very loud one.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, sorry. Over and out from sunny Glasgow.
So yeah, do you want to do the honors?
Was that loud?
That was a bit more wordy.
Oh, that was a bit weak, wasn't it?
Okay, ready? Let's do it.
Here we are doing Clapper Pact Indies interview with Wanda.
We are coming back with extraordinary footage and extraordinary images in all parts of the world.
Occasionally, you realise you had something really wonderful. It's kind of like sculpture, really. You know, you start with this rough block of stone and you end up with something really beautiful. And that's the process that I really loved. And actually, that's probably the only bit of the process I miss.
Every day is different. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know what friends you're going to make that you're going to have for decades, potentially. You never know what ideas are going to come across your table.
Working in television does enable access to people and to places and to stories that you wouldn't normally get. I think that is a real joy of whatever television you're making, the ability to travel and learn and discuss and explore.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Sort of the privilege that we have as filmmakers is incredible. I mean, we've been in places that I could never dream that we would ever be, you know, and that access is incredible. I was there when the Berlin Wall came down. You know, that for me was the moment. I flew out as a young program maker and I was there. And those are the things you remember when you know, actually captured something that mattered in history.
To be honest, this is one of the most rewarding jobs and most rewarding areas you could possibly work in. This area that I am fortunate enough to work in is so much fun. People do it for fun. People do it as a hobby. So everything about it is pretty rewarding. But in terms of what moments are the best, this is a slightly sad one. I was just thinking about this. The very first time you have the idea is very, very exciting. And when you finally finish it and hand it over is very, very exciting. Everything in between those two things is an awful lot of slog and hard work. I like it starting and I like it being over. And these days, as I get older, I'm less and less keen on that tedious bit where they put it on television, because then lots of people have opinions about it and I just get cross.
I think the best thing about my business and the business in general is people. I love working with the people. I feel very privileged, actually, when you're doing what I do, which is run a business which, of course, is multifaceted and in multiple different genres. You can spend the day talking to people about a really fun and exciting Saturday night entertainment show like The Masked Singer, or a really fun comedy drama series with Catherine Tate on Netflix, or a very tough, hard-hitting, pitiless investigation, frankly, for Dispatches. And you can go from one to the next in the course of a day. And I find that really rewarding and exciting, because I love it when you get different brains working together, coming up with different solutions, challenging things, trying things new.
There's something wonderful about having a company with extraordinarily talented people in it that didn't used to exist, now does, and makes wonderful content that much, a lot of which will last for years to come. There's something amazing about creating something from nothing where there didn't appear to be a gap, and it turns out there is.
What's the work that you're most proud of?
I think our biggest achievement is we brought back and rebooted Millionaire for ITV, and it's been on for the last few years. And we're really proud of it because it's the show that me and Matt, my business partner, we watched growing up with our family. And now my parents are watching it, my parents watching it with her grandkids. So yeah, we're really very proud of that.
The show that probably changed my life most was Spooks, because that was the first big hit. It was also at a time when indies were really becoming a force in this country in Britain, and we made that in 2000, and it was one of the first opportunities as an industry we had in the UK to show what we could do on a bigger scale. And with a spy show like that, which had action, and Matthew McFadden, David Oyelowo, Keely Hawes, that was an incredible cast who've gone on to amazing things, and the impact that had was enormous from my point of view in terms of my career, and I believe in terms of its connection to the industry to show that we could do these big long-running shows that in America they'd been used to doing, but that ran for 87 episodes, I think. So, yeah, probably that's the one.
I'm proud of every single show that I make, because even when sometimes they don't get watched as much or they go on and off air with not as much recognition as some of the big ones, they've all been crafted and loved and slogged over. It's really great when some of those shows, get huge audiences or get press or make big differences to, change the world.
Over the years, we've made some shows that have made an impact. Very early on, we did a show called Whose Line Is It Anyway in 1989. That was followed up in 1990 by Have I Got News For You? That show's still on the air, and Whose Line's still on the air in the US. And then in the 90s, we followed that up with some comedy shows like Father Ted, and later we did a show called Outnumbered, and of course more recently we're doing Derry Girls.
Razor Roof's most successful show has to be Kirsty and Phil's Love It or Listed It. We've been making that for about 8 years now. It seems to really, really resonate with the viewers. It's a great show. Kirsty and Phil love making it, and I think that comes across really strongly on camera.
I think one of the programmes I'm most proud of is a programme I made just before we started Voltage. It set the tone and the ambition for the kind of things I think we like to do. It's a programme called The Plane Crash. In fact, there's a sort of door from the programme right behind me, and we did the first ever crash test of a passenger plane, a Boeing 737, that we crashed for Channel 4 on Discovery into the Mexican desert as the world's first crash test of a plane, a giant science experiment, one of the most expensive and high-risk programmes that I think have been made to date.
I still really look back at Dead Man's Shoes as being a real pivotal moment, because we had quite a punk rock spirit to how we made that film. It was shot in 18 days. The crew was the size of the people we could fit in the minibus, so we put some quite strict rules. And I still think that to say that we shot on like 700 grand and 18 days of shoot, I still think it stands the test of time. It's a lot of people's favourite British film.
How did you get into the industry?
So I came through the sort of very much the runner, worked my way up, making cups of tea.
I was in university and I managed to get a job in television. I think I got the job because I was in the paper for being in a band the week before and for winning the Pros Medal.
I was in a car going to the Giant's Causeway, and in the back seat of the car where I was sitting was the Belfast Telegraph, which is a newspaper I don't usually read. And because it's a long drive, I was skipping through the pages, and I went to the classifieds to see if I could find a job to get me out of the call centre. And there was an ad for a job saying, do you want to work in television? No experience necessary. You just have to have TV ideas. And so I applied for that job, and then remarkably got an interview for that job. And I went to the interview in a full suit. I went in looking like I was getting a job at a pallbearers. And then I got that job. I went in as a junior developer, and I worked my way up, creating shows, producing shows, then exec producing shows over about 8 or 9 years.
I had quite a surprising route, and I was actually much older than most people that get into the industry. There was a bit of a joke that I was actually probably the oldest runner in the company, which is probably quite accurate. I'm an art school graduate, so I did a 6-week course at Glasgow University that was aimed at women returners. Part of that, there was a job placement at the end, and I got a job placement at what was then Ideal World Productions, which is now IWC Media. One of the programmes that they made, Vids, they discovered that I'd been at art school, so they kind of adopted me, and I ended up painting murals in this flat in Glasgow East End for backdrops for VTs about, well, it was film reviews. So yeah, I kind of fell into it. Yeah, I can't quite believe that I'm here 25 years later. It's great.
I think it's very important to realise that TV is about ideas, constantly ideas. You have to watch telly to make telly. And you have to listen to podcasts, listen to the radio, read newspapers.
Don't be put off by anybody who says you can't start your own company, the whole sector is consolidated into a few super indies, you're too late to the party. Nonsense. There is now, and there always will be room for new, successful, independent companies if you've got the kind of the right aptitude, ambition, prepared to work hard, and most of all, you got great creative ideas.
I always like it when I get someone who's come from college. We sometimes have open days here for people who want to come into the industry. We are reaching out to other parts of the community to try and get young people who wouldn't think necessarily that this is an industry for them. And I'm talking about class here. I was born in Liverpool, in a working class part of Liverpool. Nobody in my family went to university. They all left school when they were 14. My grandfather said, don't worry, I'll get you a job on the docks. That was my kind of security blanket. It's only because I went to university and started hanging out with people who just had that social capital. Our job is to try and open the door wider to more young people from all over the country. So there are kids in the north of England, kids in Wales, in Ireland, Scotland, all over the place, who are thinking, well, it's probably not for me, but it is for them because they're as bright as anything.
We know we need so many more people in the industry. And yet, if you talk to people in schools and colleges, they go, oh, it's such an elite industry, I'll never get into the industry. And somewhere in the middle, there's a disconnect. We can't quite get through. We are here. You've got, you can come and work.
You're an accountant. We need loads of accountants. You're an electrician. Dear God, do we need those?
If you like makeup, there's a job for that. If you like making models, there's a job.
Whatever you do, there is a place for it here.
Oh, just everything. Sound, technical things.
The magic is in the fiction. Everybody can be part of making that happen. Yeah, it absolutely can be you. If that's what you want to do, there is every chance you can.
I would put in mentors.
I think mentors are important. I think one of the things that I feel is I was really lucky to have a boss, my first boss, who was just incredibly even-handed and thoughtful and helpful. And so one of the things I'd say, and I know this is really hard, particularly when you're starting off, is almost choose your boss carefully. If you can, find yourself in a place that gets you, that encourages you, and that nurtures you. It's always good to try and listen out and gravitate towards those people that you think will bring out what you are. Stick to those people and learn everything you can from them.
I never really had a formal mentor myself, but I could name you a dozen or more people who at certain points in my life took me under their wing, gave me the benefit of their wisdom, were generous with their ideas and advice. And those people have stayed with me throughout my life.
This is a really strange industry because there isn't an obvious career ladder. It's quite weavy. How do you go from one level to the next level? And I think having a mentor can help you with that. A mentor can help put you in touch with other people who can help you. It's not just what they can do. They can listen to you. They can give advice. Sometimes you just want to talk. Sometimes you just want to talk about the ideas you've got and how you're feeling. Having a mentor can really be someone who helps you find out who you are and what you want to do and how you want to do it.
I think having mentors in our business is really important. I think the other thing I've discovered is that now that I'm in my 40s, it's good to have a mentor. It's good for me to have a mentor who's in their 20s. I mentor a lot of people, remarkably, because I still feel like a child. And that's useful in some ways, but I need the next generation coming up to tell me what's happening because I genuinely don't know. And if we're going to stay relevant, them mentoring me is actually more useful to me than me mentoring somebody else.
I certainly learn a lot from some of the younger members of our team. What I tend to do is I tend to tell people what I did which went horribly wrong, because I find that is very reassuring. It's reassuring to me because I'm still here in business having made those terrible mistakes, which when you look back and think, I don't know how I did that, but I did that. And it's reassuring for the listener because they're thinking, well, he's all right, he's still here doing it, so it's all right to make mistakes. It is all right to make mistakes. And I really don't like people who shout at people who make mistakes. You're making the same mistake more than once, you might get a mouthful from me because it's about learning from mistakes, not repeating them.
I can't remember what happened, but we were filming with Jan Alumni. It was on film and it was meant to be automatically synced and it didn't automatically sync. And it was sort of my fault and sort of the cameraman's fault, and some poor man then had to sync up 40 hours of footage by hand, lip syncing. You learn never ever assume anything. When you go back and you look at your mistakes, to go back to that point, you learn that it was based on an assumption.
What we did was, when we started to have a couple of hits, which was, we'd been in business for 15 years, and we suddenly started to get some hit shows. We suddenly started to get traction in America, and we got excited, and we hired a whole lot of kind of new staff. We hired a whole lot of new, quite senior, quite expensive executives to come and work in the company, because we thought the company was going to grow really quickly. And it didn't. It didn't. In fact, it got stuck. We entered the down sweep of the business cycle, and we suddenly had all this expensive overhead that we couldn't afford to pay their salaries. And I had to sit down in the course of one day and basically let 6 or 7 people, senior people, talented people, clever people, and people I knew really well, and let them go. And that is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I think some of these people are probably still, nearly 20 years later, have still not properly forgiven me for that. But it had to be done, because I think otherwise the company would have gone down without a doubt.
I think one of the big things that I really value is collaboration. You know, working with other people, not necessarily even on your own projects, but just talking to each other about what's happening in the world and in the industry.
Most of the time in Britain, it's incredibly collaborative. I find the Pact producers genuinely are collaborative with each other. We share information, we are respectful of each other, we're supportive of success. I really believe that. And but it's also competitive, in the sense that there are slots to fill and there are buyers looking for content, and we all want our content to be made. So yes, it's competitive, but in a healthy way, where if we're all doing well, then we're all doing better, I believe. So I think it's wonderful, and there is a real sense of support here in the UK, definitely.
I think the independent sector, the independent production sector, it's very competitive. But always I've found that independent companies have an awful lot in common with each other. It's a very friendly rivalry. So, those of us who work in the indie sector, ultimately we would all get to the front of the queue for that big commission or that award or whatever, and that's good. It keeps us on our toes. And yet there's a lot of solidarity among independent producers. And when other independent producers, companies run by people I know or friends of mine have hits, I'm delighted for them.
When you get creative people working together, there is a sense that you want to do the best, you want to win the gold medal. And that can be really healthy because it pushes us outside of our comfort zone. And you always need to be challenging what comes next, and creative, competitive people around you is healthy. I think it's actually brought out the best in people, and it's meant that people have realised that there's a lot of resource out there and that we are all in this together, and therefore when you work together you can be much stronger.
Yeah, I think we've always had good experiences, and people are universally really nice. I actually mean that as well. I'm not even making that up. I actually mean that. I'm not trying to be nice. That's actually true. People are universally really nice.
I always think, well, someone's going to choose, if they choose your project over mine, it's because they needed that type of project on that day. So I think if you can work with each other, even in small ways, even just to ring each other up and say, how you doing? God, it's a bit mad, isn't it, at the moment? It just sort of puts it all in perspective, because, sometimes you can be in such a bubble that the real world seems a very distant place. I think for someone who's considering this as a career, just make sure you've got people that you can work with who you like and trust and respect. I think if you've got that, you'll be able to stand a chance of telling the stories you want to tell.
In production design and in camera and sound and editors, it really is a team effort. Obviously you've got a director and you've got a producer, you've got a writer, but trust me, the most rewarding thing is assembling that crew, because if you get it right, and they're good, and we do get it right, there are some amazing crew in this country, is that you then As a producer, if you've got the right components, you should just need to oil it. Obviously, you have some decisions to make during the thing, but I do love putting together a team of people that are going to help me, the writer, director, deliver their story.
I think my biggest achievement has been to see real talent come through the company. Although we're part owned by Tom Jones, to see Alex Jones, Steve Jones, Gethin Jones, well, anybody with a bloody Jones really, come through as presenters, or crafted, people from bands like the Stereophonics or the Manics, soon after Cool Cymru, coming to work with us as editors or dubbing mixers, now all over the industry doing top network shows. That's the buzz I get, is the sort of, and also the gratitude you get from those people years later when they know who was there for them. And they were there for me on the journey. So, and I feel like that with my kids now, that they are coming through, that I've given them something, their vocation, that they really are grabbing by both hands and running with it.
For me, it's about finding the right people who share a similar sense of taste and ambition to you, and then also not being afraid of going out there and selling shows, because we're nothing if we haven't got the money to make a particular drama. So if you're there and running a company or part of a company, you just have to be prepared to be a salesman as well, which is unexpected but a really important part of the job.
Very much two sides to the making of television or the working in a production company. One is actually making the content and being creative and getting out and exploring the world and asking the questions and telling the stories. But also, just as important, is the sort of the back office stuff of making that content sell.
Don't get down when you're told no. Get back up. People will reject your ideas, and then a year later you'll switch on the telly and you'll see another show which was your idea in the first place, and you'll wonder how the heck that happened. That's the nature of telly.
Everything comes from building contacts, from building stories, learning how to pitch a story, learning to hold on to a story, learning to get access. It's all about tenacity. You have to hold on to what you believe in.
Have a thick skin. There is rejection in our business as well, inevitably. And with a creative business, you're putting yourself out there. And whatever department you're in, you have a creative opinion. And that opinion can be challenged and can be complicated for people. So I think, a thick skin, tenacity, keep going, challenge everything, think for the future, try not to think in the now. You've got to think ahead and try and break new ground as opposed to emulate current success. I think that's really, really important in this industry, to keep innovating.
I think when you're in the creative sector, you are used to being a fighter. And I think you have to have that. You've got to be a warrior, because it's not for the faint-hearted. So right from the beginning of my career, I've always worked in pretty high-octane, high-pressure environments, whether it was in journalism, which is where I started, or then later in television, and now obviously running a business. People have come across my path who've challenged me and said, you should try this or do something differently, or the way you're doing that isn't right, try something else. But also, if you listen carefully, they'll give you ideas about how to do things differently. And taking that on board, you don't always have to act on it. But if you do act on it, and I will say just one thing, for example, in the pandemic, one of my colleagues said, let's set up a Cobra team right at the very beginning. And that Cobra team will be a very small kind of elite group of 5 people, if you like, that's really hard-nosed and brutal about this existential threat that faces our business. And that group, I just specifically brought people into that group because I knew these were people that were willing to say to me no, and willing to tell me the hard stuff that I didn't want to hear but needed to hear. So I think I would simply say that lots of difficult things happen in life. The life of a producer is a long and winding road, but it's critical always to listen very, very carefully, and then have the bravery, the courage to act on those difficult experiences, because then you can turn venom into rocket fuel.
Receiving notes on a cut or a piece of music or a script is a tough process. Don't look at what the note was, look at when it happened. When it happened in the script or in the show. Go back and look and try and figure out what went wrong there. Why suddenly the mechanism of the story exposed itself and lost at least one member of the audience. It's a tough thing, that, because the only note you ever want is, I love you.
I try and breed a healthy sense of disloyalty here, where people call out stuff that they don't believe in, because that way, you have a strong team who feel that they have their own voice.
I've had to learn to be a CEO, because as a creative, I'm very passionate and very emotional. You have to be to tune into things around you. But being the statesman, being above that, dealing with difficult situations or people or talent is one of the biggest challenges. And as you grow, you learn to step back from a situation and read it.
Matt and I are really sort of clear about the things we look for in a person when they come to work at the company. And we always say we would back enthusiasm and optimism over experience. And even if you haven't got the skills, we can teach you the skills, or we have people working at Stellify who know more than we do, and if you want to work in that department, we can get them to teach you the skills and so forth. What we can't teach people is optimism and enthusiasm, and so when we see that, we always back it. I would back that every day of the week.
If you really believe in something in this industry, you can probably get it done. You just have to have the perseverance and the belief and the determination to go out and get it.
I think it's a fantastic industry to work in, and I think you should try, if this is what you want to do, then you should go for it. You should be prepared for knockbacks and for difficulties, because it's about taste and it's about subjective opinion. So sometimes you won't be right for people. It doesn't mean that you're wrong at all. Whether that's, you're writing a script or as a producer or just to get into the production industry, you have to keep trying, and you have to be prepared to take knockbacks and keep going for it. And you have to believe in your voice as well, I think. I think what's really important to me is I know what my opinion is, and I've stuck by my opinion while listening. So, just be really sure in what it is you want to do and go for it.
I do think that the key attribute is the ability to get up off the floor and go again. Because if you don't have that, you can be as talented or as genius or as educated as anybody, but if you don't have persistence and determination, you're not going to go anywhere.
Okay, so what do you think the next 30 years of the industry looks like?
Look, I think in 30 years' time, I love this industry. I hope I'm not past it in 30 years' time. So I hope I'm going to be just sitting and watching it and enjoying it and watching all the brilliant things that the new generation of talent are going to take and stretch to be. When I started in TV, it was a completely different place. That was 30 years ago. I think it was like 4 or 5 channels or something.
Will Channel 4 still be there? What shape will it take? Will the BBC still be there? What shape will that take? Will Scotland be independent? Will we still be part of a United Kingdom? Who knows? But one thing is for sure, in amongst all that, is that we'll still be consuming content.
What won't change is that people still want content. They're going to want good ideas. It doesn't matter the platform. Who knows what platforms will exist? I'll be in my 70s.
Looking at the next 30 years, I'm excited by it. I mean, I grew up in a mining town 12 miles from where we sat now, and I wasn't from a privileged background. I did go to uni, was very lucky to go to uni. We really need to keep pushing diversity, and socio-economic diversity needs to be pushed. I'm really hoping that we start to find storytellers and filmmakers and people in the industry that are from all backgrounds. The more diverse we get, the more amazing stories we'll tell.
I think this is an industry that's difficult to get into if you're not someone who's been to Oxford or Cambridge. I think it's still difficult. I think that's changing, and I think it's changing really quickly. I think all the broadcasters and financiers are now finally realising that to have diversity in the broadest sense as part of their team is better for the projects they make, be that class, race, sexuality. I think having a range, because the viewers are a range, the viewers aren't all the same. So to me, it makes sense to have different types of people making decisions as to what gets made. It's just a really commercial, culturally, a good thing to do.
I think there'll be more CG shooting. I think there'll be less travelling to locations. I think we'll be doing more virtually. Gaming and leisure is going to become bigger and bigger. All those department stores that are closing down are probably going to become leisure venues. So what does that mean for our industry? I don't know yet. It's about all storytelling in all its different forms as it evolves over the coming years.
It is way better to be alive now and trying to get into this industry than it ever has been at any point. Now you have on your iPhone more technology to make a TV show than I can imagine. There's a better camera on that than we used to make Doctor Who on.
I think one of the differences there has been since I was starting out in the industry is the ability to create content is much easier, I think. It's easier to grab a camera or an iPhone, editing software, etc. I think it's easier for people who want to sort of demonstrate their creative prowess at whatever level and just cut something, edit something, shoot something, make something.
There are real skills you can get now, which were harder to come by when I was starting out, which is you can learn Photoshop, you can learn cameras, you can learn editing, whereas now you can do it at home. But you can demonstrate how good you are now with your socials, and you can create your own content. It's the access points are easier than they've ever been in terms of creating material.
When I look at the past, it's like going through time travel. We have been sitting around a fire, looking at flames, looking at stories within the flames in caves since human beings came on this earth. And I believe that's going to continue always. There are always going to be storytellers, and they will always be using images to tell stories. The platform is going to change, the technology is going to change, but as long as we keep seeking out stories and crafting stories and finding people who can film and people who can write and people who can colour and people who can develop ideas, our job is to find people who are talented to do all the jobs that allow us to keep telling stories.